This is West Texas Today on AM 950, 100.7 FM.
Hey, welcome back. It's 7:35 on Wednesday. It's Hump Day, the 16th day of April. Good to have you with us. Jim Douglas, Dave King, along with Tommy Duncan, and he's taking calls this morning at 770-5950. And high today is going to be, as you heard Matt Ernst say, 76 and sunshine. Beautiful day in the neighborhood. It's always a beautiful day in Lubbock. Just some days are more beautifuler than others. That's all. All right, Dave. Yesterday we were talking quite a bit about the story that came out of Nevada about the rancher out there that was doing battle with federal forces out there. At least not gunfire battle. Thank goodness that was averted. But talking about the property rights and what have you, and we had a lot of questions and a lot of allegations and a lot of other information that was or was not valid. And we've got on the phone with this morning Mr. Scott Lewis, and Scott is from Austin, Texas. And Scott's been with us before, and Scott has, in the early days, I guess, early stages, was one of the strong advocates for the concealed carry on campus campaign that was going on around the state of Texas and other states as well. And Scott, welcome back to West Texas Today. Good to have you with us.
Well, thanks, Jim. It's good to be back.
All right. Well, okay. Tell us now. You sent me some information yesterday about kind of the backstory on a lot of these things that were, in some cases, not brought up in the conversation about the rancher in Nevada. From what you've researched and what you found out, kind of tell us your take on that whole episode that's been going on in Nevada.
Sure. Well, as you alluded to, I'm involved with a number of gun rights organizations, and obviously, people grabbing their guns and heading out to Nevada for a standoff with the federal government, that catches the attention of gun rights organizations. So, we've been following this pretty closely, and honestly, there's just a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of people who think that this is about the federal government trying to steal a rancher's land, when in reality, it's about the rancher using public lands. A lot of people think that this is the federal government interjecting itself into a conflict over state land, when in reality this land has been owned by the federal government since, I believe, 1834, I believe? 1848, that's right, 1848. And there's people who believe that this rancher had some sort of inherent right or contract or homestead right to graze on these lands, which is not accurate. In fact, the Taylor Grazing Act of 1934 explicitly states that grazing permits do not grant any type of, estate in or title to or special interest in the land. And then, a lot of people feel like that this was just a case of the government overreacting, and that the real problem here is that the government sent, armed agents to a cattle roundup. And, the reason they sent the armed agents is that this rancher had repeatedly warned the Bureau of Land Management that he owned firearms and was going to do whatever it took to stop federal agents from impounding his cattle. And so this is really, I think, I know a lot of people are upset at the federal government, and I think that they see this as the battle they've been waiting for, but this is really not the fight to get behind, because it is a pretty clear-cut case of a rancher who has been, making his living off of federal land without paying the grazing fees. He has not paid grazing fees to the federal government since 1993, and in 1994 the federal government revoked his grazing permit for non-payment, and they've been trying for the past 20 years to get him to remove his cattle from these lands, and finally last summer the Bureau of Land Management was sued by environmental groups for not enforcing these court orders against this rancher. And so the Bureau of Land Management really had no choice but to go in as a last resort and remove these cattle themselves. And, when they went, they took armed agents with them, because this guy had repeatedly told them that he was going to turn it into a range war if they tried to impound his cattle.
Hey, Scott, let me ask you something. How does this desert tortoise fit into this story?
In 1993, the Bureau of Land Management started implementing restrictions on the number of cattle that could be grazed on this part of the Nevada desert, because at that point the desert tortoise was on the verge of extinction. And at this point, Cliven Bundy, the rancher, he said that he wasn't going to abide by these rules, and that he was going to just keep grazing there anyways. And so that was where the tortoise came into the picture. And this is, regardless of what you think about, environmental actions like that, this land was owned by the federal government. They did have the right when it came time to renew this grazing permit to change the terms, just as your landlord can raise the rent when it comes time to renew your lease, and you don't get to just say, well, I don't agree with that, so I'm just going to keep living here for free. You either renew your lease or you go somewhere else, and that's essentially what this rancher did. He said, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stay here for free.
Well, Scott, I'm reading a Washington Post report, which I have to assume that there's some credibility to the Washington Post, and they say that that the Cliven Bundy, whose family homesteaded the ranch in 1877, and he's accusing, of course, the federal government of a land grab. What does that mean, that his family homesteaded the land in 1877? And in my way of thinking, if you homestead land, it gives you the right to it. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, his family homesteaded 160 acres. That was the limit at the time on homesteaded land, was 160 acres. So his family homesteaded 160 acres, which he still owns, and the federal agents have not gone near that 160 acres. That 160 acres really has nothing to do with this. What this is about the roughly 160,000 acres on which his cattle have been roaming free and grazing without paying any permits. And, the reason they enacted the Taylor Grazing Act of 1934 is that up until that point, they had just treated these public lands like they were public domain, and anybody could graze there, and it just kind of became a free-for-all where the first person to get their cattle to good grass claimed that grass, and it was, destroying the federal lands, and so they decided they're going to have to start limiting who could graze there. And it's kind of like if you were making your living from logging a national forest or something like that. That A, you're depleting a natural resource without paying anything back, and B, it's giving you an unfair advantage over people who are actually paying for the land on which they're doing business. I mean, if you look at what it would cost to run this type of ranching operation here in Texas, it's astronomical. And this guy's, basically just he's milking the federal government. It's basically welfare ranching.
Yeah. Scott, can you hang on a second? We're going to take a quick break and come right back, if you don't mind. We got to sell something. We'll be right back. We're talking with Scott Lewis, and we're talking about the rancher in Nevada and the big hoop brouhaha that's come out of that. So stay with us. Much more to come right here on West Texas Today, Lubbock's News, Talk, and Sports Station.
This is West Texas Today on AM 950, 100.7 FM. Lubbock's News, Talk, Sports.
And welcome back at 7:47. Oh, thank heaven, on this 16th day of April. Jim Douglas, Dave King, and now Choice Woodman taking calls, 770-5950. Continuing our visit with Mr. Scott Lewis, and we're talking about the situation happening in Nevada with a rancher who seemed to be enjoying, I guess, snubbing his nose at the federal government. And Scott, when the agents showed up with, and they were all armed based on the threats that Mr. Lost his name, the rancher had made, Bundy. Mr. Bundy. I mean, obviously, it seems to me like that they were doing the smart thing to stand down and not turn into some sort of another Waco riot or something. Do you agree that the right thing to do was not to provoke anything any further at that point?
Oh, absolutely. I think that was the smart move. I mean, this could have gotten very ugly. There were a lot of so-called militia members who showed up there and said very clearly that they were looking for a fight, that they were prepared for this to turn into a war. And I think, this could have been worse than Waco and Ruby Ridge and all those incidents combined. So I think they definitely did the right thing. For anybody who thinks that this was just a good salt-of-the-earth American who was trying to make an honest living, I'm just going to run through a few of the things this guy said. They said he repeatedly threatened the federal government, saying that he had firearms and he was going to do whatever it took to keep them from taking his land. He said, I abide by all state laws, but I abide by almost zero federal laws. He said, I don't recognize that the United States government as even existing. He at one point, he gave the Clark County Sheriff a deadline to disarm the federal agents and bring the firearms to him. This is a guy who was not operating at the same level that I think you and I operate. And
do you mean he's not playing with a full deck? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Well, so, Scott, do you suspect that, of course, the feds will put out just an arrest warrant for him?
I think that's probably what's going to happen. I think, realistically, they're going to wait till this simmers down, and then they're probably going to go in there and probably try to handle this as a simple,
Yeah. Or, I mean, he's got
SWAT raid or something like that.
He has to go to town at some point in time, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I don't, I told somebody the other day, I said, my guess is they're going to wait till this guy and his family are headed into town sometime and pull him over, and that's going to be at least the end of that part of it. And real quick, just to give people a little background on this land, the U.S. federal government took possession of the land, this disputed land, in 1848 as part of the Treaty of the Guadalupe Hidalgo, which ended the Mexican-American War. And then when the Nevada State Constitution was ratified in 1863, it confirmed that the United States federal government owns the public lands of Nevada, and that the state of Nevada has no claims to those lands. So there's really no dispute over who owns this land, although that I think that has been a point of contention among some pundits, but it's really very clear who owns the land.
Now, let's just say that, for argument's sake, Scott, that it does happen like you played out. He gets pulled over on the way to church or something, and they arrest him right there, and there's not a big incident. What kind of fallout do you think will be from the people who have kind of adopted this as their cause celeb if they find out he's been arrested or taken into custody or whatever?
There will certainly be an outcry. I think, I'm not an expert on law enforcement, but I think if the federal government is wise, they're going to wait a little while and let some of the fervor over this die down. They're not going to strike right now while it's hot. And I think there's a chance you'll see some of the armed militia members who showed up at this event. See warrants issued for their arrest also. I mean, there were pictures of men on overpasses with rifles pointed at federal agents, from sniper positions. And, some of these guys were dumb enough to give their names to newspaper reporters, and, they're clearly pictured there. I don't think that it would be too hard to make a case that they were threatening federal agents. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a number of warrants come out sometime in the next year, and it could be, we could be talking 6-9 months down the road, but I think it would be very unwise for the federal government to let this precedent stand. You can't, maintain a precedent that all you have to do is get enough armed people on your side and you can defy federal law. That would be very dangerous.
Well, what are the chances of copycat situations where other ranchers or other landowners would kind of pull the same kind of stunt? Do you think this is provoking others to do this?
Well, I think, because of a lot of the backlash we've seen against the federal government in recent years, this is something that's been building for a long time. So some of these, these so-called militia members were chomping at the bit for a chance to do something like this. So I think definitely if there were another issue that came up that looked like a states' right issue or, one man against the federal government issue, that it would not be unexpected to see this type of response.
Yeah, very good. Well, Scott, we sure appreciate your time this morning and giving us a little bit different insight into some of this, and we appreciate your time very much.
Well, I thank you for having me.
Oh, you bet. That's Scott Lewis, and down in Austin, Texas, and very much into guns rights, and he was one of those who was very early on in the forefront for the organization down in Austin that was promoting concealed carry on campuses, so we appreciate Scott spending time with us. 7:54 on this Wednesday morning.